Welcome to Writers Are the Best Weirdos, the podcast starring me, Julia Roberts. I am a creativity coach, speaker, writer, and a weirdo. Aren't you? We're going to answer a lot of questions about pubbing and promoting and marketing your books, so stay tuned. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Writers Are the Best Weirdos interview. And I'm here today with Danielle M. Miller, whom I've known for so many years. It's just really a pleasure to host you in this format after all this while.
Thank
So
you.
before we get back to that, I'm just going to tell people who we're looking at, who we're talking to today. Danielle M. Miller, I just call her Danielle, is a brand strategist for creative and service-based entrepreneurs, an online educator and Amazon best-selling author of the book Smarty Pants Branding. She's a former special education teacher, life coach, and has worked with some of the most influential and respected personal brands in the e-online space. Oh, the online space. I thought, what's e-online? That's
The
like,
electron, well, that works too.
it's like extra computery, right?
Right, exactly.
She can be found at daniellemmiller.com. Don't forget that little middle M. Anyway, we are back. So let me just talk to you about branding. Do I really need a brand for myself instead of like, I'm not a box of cereal? What makes you think I need a brand?
Right. So yeah, that's a very popular misconception around the idea of having a brand.
Right.
And if I could maybe shift your thinking about that or your point of view, if you thought about it as a way to connect with your audience, as a way for your audience to have a relationship with you, to know that when they read something that you have produced or creative, that they really have a more intimate sense of who you are and what you're about.
So my brand is just my name. It's not like Julio's or Julio's.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, unless you have some sort of following like Madonna, who has one name. No, your brand is not just your name. Your brand is made up of a lot of components. And if you think of it as the idea of this imprint that you leave behind. So people not only get to know your name, obviously that you want them to be able to recognize your name and to have that recognition, but you also want them to have an experience and how they think about you and how they perceive who you are as a person, as a creative entrepreneur, not just what your name is.
So actually we talked about this a little bit. That happens whether or not I create a brand. I have a brand in the world that has to do with just who I am, what I wear, my energy, that kind of thing. So that gets put out in the world, whether or not I understand that, or whether or not I control that, or whether or not I want it to. Because I talk to people.
Exactly. So you're a brand if you do, and you're a brand if you don't.
Exactly. You're a brand if you do, and you're a brand if you don't, right?
No matter what happens.
Understand that power and not just give it away.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So there's also this very popular saying of you aren't your brand. Your brand is what other people say you are. That is, to an extent, is true, but you get to drive the conversation. You get to control and have strategy and intention around how people perceive you and what they say about you. It isn't just random unless you choose to not think of your personal brand that way.
I gotta say though, there's some comfort in that because I don't have to put all of me into that brand. I can still be me with my family and my weird habits or whatever it is, and the brand doesn't have to be all of me. It can be the public part of me, which is hopefully a lot of you, so that you have an integrated brand and an authentic relationship with your brand. But also, hopefully, there's something held back so that you're not, if nothing else, boring everybody. I don't know. I haven't even mentioned to my social following yet that I cut my toenails this morning.
Or that you change the creamer in your coffee.
Some things are held back.
Right, exactly. Well, and that's the beauty also of being strategic with a personal brand is you get to decide, you get to figure out what your level of discernment is around what you want to share with people, how much you want to let people into your sphere. That level of intimacy, that's all controlled by what you want to put out there in the world. Some people enjoy throwing up on, their audience on a daily basis, and they're posting constantly on Instagram stories, and they're telling them every minute detail of their day. That's not necessary to have a personal brand. It's when you put these components together, your brand actually
I
is
mean,
an asset.
particularly as a writer, because a brand is almost synonymous with your voice. And you kind of have a written voice and a speaking voice. Those are two separate things quite often. But it's almost like that. Like, people understand and expect what to hear from you. What's your voice? What's your point of view? What's your worldview? Your worldview informs almost everything you write. So it starts to coalesce in people's brand, as a brand of you, I mean. So what steps would one
Correct.
take to start to form a brand?
So the first thing that you have to think about is, to me, it's very interesting, because I think a personal brand is also a journey of self-discovery. It's really like peeling back these layers of who you are and how you want to show up in the world, and what you want people to think of you and how you want them to perceive you, which is not in any way, a lot of people get that confused with being fake or being something that you're not. It is in no way designed to be that. It is simply a way to have your brand have a foundation so that it's working for you all the time. So the first thing that you want to do is you really want to think about, how do I want people to think of me? What do I want to be known for?
I mean, I think a lot of people will consider that maybe arrogant, but because you're choosing how you want to be known, or because, you know what I mean? Or maybe, but I can understand what you're saying about people thinking it's fake or something too, because a little bit we feel like that's up to, like, talent. I always say, put a pin in talent. You don't know if you're talented. Put out your stuff and let the world decide if you're talented. Because so if all you do is worry about talent, you're not producing anything. And it's really almost arrogant to assume you don't have talent, or as it is to assume you do. You don't know. You just go with what drives you to write. And you wouldn't be writing if you weren't driven to write, which is why I always say writers are the best weirdos, because we're compelled, and we're compelled for a reason that is unique. Like, we go, this isn't being said, this isn't being represented. And that's why we're kind of on the marginalia. And that's why I consider us the best kind of weirdos. We want to, change that, our share of voice. That being said, there's an arrogance to assuming that the world doesn't want to know you, or that the world won't like what you're doing. You don't know. So what you really need to do from where you sit, if I'm getting this correctly, is understand what part of you want to share and how that looks in words and pictures. Is that true?
Yeah, that is correct. And
Mhm.
that is in no way arrogant or self-serving. Actually, I just posted about this the other day. So interesting that you brought that up, because if you think about it from the perspective of that, you're really doing a disservice to the people that you want to impact by not thinking that your voice, that you have a message to share. Because like you said, there's something that's not being said, and it's
Right?
not being said in only the way that you can say it.
Right.
And that your right people, the people who you most want to impact, or you want to have
Or,
hear that.
or whom you can help or enlighten or entertain, the people who in the world need your message, whether or not you want to impact them or they are just waiting for you. I don't
Right.
have a clue about this. You can help me, So,
Yes.
okay. So those people, go ahead.
Yes. So those people, so when you think that, it's self-serving, or it's egotistical, or it's
Well,
selfish.
it's because we are so familiar with corporate brands, which are all those things. They're,
Yes.
they're push marketing. We are the best. And they are, you know, they're in your face. They're all the commercials that we're sick of, so that's a little bit why we associate brands with something we're sick of, or something
Right.
that's, that's full of itself, or something that's not give and take.
Right. And it can also be very difficult, because at the end of the day, you are a human being, and you are complex, and you have multi dimensions to who you are, what you're interested in. And so it can be, when we think of personal brands, there tends to be this sort of dismissive attitude that, well, you can't a person can't be a brand. But I challenge people to think of it in this regard. You have a message to share. You have something to say. people aren't going to hear it unless you have defined what you stand for, what your voice out in the world has to say, and recognizing that the experience that you bring to the table is unique. It's different. It's something nobody else has ever before or since will ever be exactly the same.
I think people look at that statement right there and shudder. Like, I don't have anything special. I'm not so special. But I mean, we don't have to be more special than in the Barney way. You know, you are special. You're the only one. We don't have to be more special than that. That's
Speaking of Barney.
Yeah, you've got all the colors going for Barney. We don't have to be more special than that. That's enough, because you add the uniqueness of everybody. We're each unique. With the drive to write, and you've got something that is filtered in and becomes potent. And that's what's worth sharing. That's why the specialness, the weirdo, and the drive to write all coalesces into this weirdness funnel, into this funnel of, it becomes potent, becomes powerful. So what you're saying is, you've got this stuff to say, you've got this things to share, and you haven't yet even figured out how to convey that quickly, or how to make sure people know what to look to you for, right? Like, so people can't look to me for perfection, expertise. I have some expertise, not that, but like, they're not going to be that whole 1 million awards and a resume the length of your arm. And I have never worked at the White House, but but you see what I'm saying? Like, you need to tell people what to look to you for. I am really good at what I do, but it's not that. So just even shortening the list of what kinds of things you are in the world to do is already a service. Now, does it evolve, or do you just do this questionnaire and you get this brand and that's your brand?
And there it is, done. Doop, doop, throw it away. No, it's always evolving. I mean, that's the thing. Again, because of the personal brand, you're growing, you're evolving, your experiences change. What you valued in your 20s is probably not the same as what you value in your 40s. And so those things are going to grow along with you. Does that mean that you have to completely flip your brand around? Absolutely not. There's a difference between brand identity and brand personality. Brand identity can change over time, and typically it does. Brand personality tends to stay more stable. You're probably, if you're already a funny person, you're going to be a funny person until you're 97 years old. That's not probably going to change.
I was worried about that. Check.
Yeah. I'm not going to lose that. That's, those sorts of things tend to stay stable over time. And that is a psychological perspective. So those things you can build upon, you can refine them as you grow into whatever identity is currently your
expression. I've had different jobs over the years. I was in marketing for a long time, which is why you and I can talk brand so comfortably. But I was in marketing, brainstorming, strategic work, all of those things. I still wasn't the person who had worked for, all the major. I hadn't been a VP at such and such. I wasn't all that credentialed stuff. I still wasn't that person. I was a funny, casual, big ideas person, So that doesn't change now that I'm an author teaching creativity. There's kind of an obvious flow from one to the other. Right. So that's what you're saying. Like, over time, who you are doesn't really change. Just what you are offering might change. And those things could start to change, could start to clarify. Like the Mighty Writers Club, I didn't have that when I was younger. And that comes from specifically the Might tool, the tool of Mighty, I think I call it the Mighty. Anyway, there's a tool that uses how might I, and changes how you perceive things. And that's why I call it that. So that is branding in and of itself. There's a funnel that you take the piece parts of what you care about, and it becomes something specific to what you're offering.
That's correct. And like you said, you're still that funny, big idea person. You've just channeled that into other things. You've just, your identity has grown and evolved. And so those core things are still applicable to whatever you're bringing to the table.
can a brand be limiting though? What if I now wanted to write um, something? I guess I would never want to write something really serious and expert. You know what I mean? So that's
Well,
really, as
maybe you
long as it's,
might.
maybe I would write a history of such and such and a feminist history of, I'm fishing hard. But there's always been that little aspect of feminism, but that would be a big departure.
Right.
Whereas if I had a novel coming out, it would most likely fit this crazy background that I have. I mean, it'd be most likely be a circus because that's kind of who I am.
Right.
Right.
And you've actually hit on something that is, I've seen people struggle, authors especially, I mean, I've worked with so many authors, have struggled with over time, is that maybe they want to veer into something else. And this is why a personal brand is so powerful, because you have the ability to do that as a personal brand, as opposed to if you were this corporation or business that said, okay, this is what we do, and now you want to try to do something different. The umbrella of your personal brand can fit all those things.
Yeah, that is a really interesting point, and that is people think that a brand will limit you. And if it's personal and based on just sort of who you are, most of what you'll choose to do over a lifetime, because I'm not in my 20s, over a lifetime,
I'm just barely out of mine.
just barely out of mine.
Barely.
We'll definitely coalesce around who you are,
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
there could be departures. I mean, I could see writing something. I did write a book that was a research book on sex, lies, and creativity, which is really serious reading about the gender differences in creative thinking. So yeah, that is a really different thing for my brand to encompass.
Mhm.
It's not
But
funny.
does it have your flavor? Does it have humor in it? Does it have sort of those
Maybe
unique,
a
those
little, but
insights?
it's as serious as I get. But because it was my master's thesis,
Okay.
But that being said, it still is something I care enormously about. That does come through all the time from me.
Mhm.
And I will say, some people have said you don't have to try and figure out your genre or stick to this or stick to that. Whatever you choose to write will define your genre, your
Mhm.
general output will define your brand. So your brand comes from what you write to some degree. So if I continue to write those sorts of researched books about, neurological differences between men and women, my brand would start to shift, and this would not be an appropriate background,
No,
right?
correct.
If
And
that's what I
again,
want.
um your innate personality would still be coming through there. You're still, that's still would be showing up. And no matter what you're writing, the
Right.
core of who you are, when you distill that down and you really hone in on your core values and your gifts and your personality traits, those are still going to come through no matter what topic you're writing about.
This is a little like an actor and the roles they might choose. And it is the roles they choose, and those do define you to some degree. Definitely, some roles definitely are defining in your lifetime. But how you appear on talk shows and talk about things and all those things also add into your brand. Your brand is not necessarily created by others, like the roles are written by other people or directors or whatever. You are still out there talking about your stuff and talking about, whatever it is you're offering, and that
Mhm.
you still have a brand. Even if all I was doing was offering your work, like your classes, and I didn't have my own classes or point of view, I would still have a brand because I'm offering them differently from how you would.
That's
And I'd
right.
be reaching and influencing different people. Different people
Mhm.
look at me than would look at you and go, oh, I like her, I need that. I
Right.
wanted to hear that from somebody today. Mhm.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, typically, I mean, information is in and of itself isn't new. It's the way the message is delivered, and the messenger. That's what we connect with. That's what builds that
Listen.
relationship. And
Sorry. You know what? These bright lights make me sneeze. Does that ever happen to you? Do you ever sneeze in the sun?
yes,
Yes. That only happens to 30% of people, but it happens to me a lot.
isn't that
But
funny?
walk out and then people who don't, that doesn't happen to them, they don't know from. They're like, what? That's not a
What is
thing.
that about?
And you're like, 30% of people. So that
Also,
like,
don't like cilantro.
oh, you don't like cilantro? And
Oh
yet,
no! Oh no!
oh,
No! No!
how much does that factor into your personal brand?
Very occasionally, I will talk about making tacos, and there's no cilantro in there.
My husband doesn't like it, but I always put it in anyway because what is it without cilantro? It's nothing, right?
Oh, it's
Oh,
quite delicious with some pepper
oh,
and
okay.
cayenne.
But I don't like, I mean, I do like hot sauce, but I can't tolerate it anymore because I think I mentioned I'm out of my 20s. But oh my word.
Yeah.
Okay, so what would be the starting point if I wanted to have, I have a lot of my brand elements developed.
Mhm.
It just came out of me little by little.
Yeah.
Um, how
You
would
know,
you
I would
how
say
would
the
you
first
ramp that
thing
up and
is,
make it faster? You know what I mean?
yeah, what do I want to be known for? How do I want people to think of me? What? And again, you can, there's, take this with a grain of salt, but taking some personality assessments and seeing what your gifts are, what are you naturally extroverted, what are the other things that maybe go along with that. Again, like I said, you could take those with a grain of salt, but I think they're helpful in giving you a base to start with. A
Mhm.
lot of people don't know how to describe themselves, and they don't know how to talk about who they are. And that at
Mhm.
least gives you some language to use.
Right? I think one of the things I did when I was starting out, and what I did with some of my mothers when I was teaching mothers, Motherhood to Otherhood, my 2008 book, but
Hmm.
I asked them to ask 10 people for 10 adjectives.
Hmm.
And then they'd get their 10 adjectives, and then I would ask them to look at what were the top two,
Yeah.
like repeatedly, what did people say? And
Hmm.
I'm going to tell you this, and I didn't even know that funny would be top box for me, right? I just take that for granted, and
Yeah.
until 10 people make it the first thing they say over and over and over again. Like it was, I think it was 8 out of 10 was their first entry, funny.
Yeah.
So it isn't necessarily that that's news to me, but it's news to me how much impact that has. And it's
Correct.
news to me that people see that first because,
Hmm.
I take it for granted. And I feel
Hmm.
like it does a lot of good things for me, like makes people socially comfortable, whatever, but I take it for granted. So then I saw that and I'm like, I don't even try and be funny when I write. It's not funny. Like
Yeah.
I didn't even think of like making funny an important part of my brand,
Right.
right?
Hmm. But
Because I came out
it's
of,
innately part of who you are, and it comes
right.
out so naturally. You don't even think about it.
Right. But so, I mean, but I had come out of corporate branding. I really felt like a brand had to be this box that was consistent and, had its 4 points of view that were always, were in every communication, all 4 were, whatever. If you think of
Correct.
Barbie's
Hmm.
always what? She's always the same person. She's always that same brand going on since 1959. She's shifted empowerment wise, but she still is something for young girls to project their dreams onto,
Hmm.
and so anyway, that came back, and like I said, funny being the top box really shifted for me what my brand could be. I could really see then um, it was just liberating, you
Yeah,
know,
it
that
is.
I always feel like here's why, because I tell a joke and like at dinner as a kid or whatever, and my mom would be like, grown, we're talking, the grown-ups are talking.
Yeah.
It's often disruptive to be funny. So I often had a lot of feedback that was like, don't do it in class, don't do it at a meeting. This is a client conversation. This is a grown-up conversation. So I never really thought of it as a power. I thought of it as an irrepressible thing that happened in inopportune times. So, so I would say that if you get to do that, where you ask 10 people for 10 adjectives and you can just literally see what are your top two,
Yeah.
it can change not just what you know about yourself, but um, what rises to the top. What's the most important thing about
Yes.
your brand? Yeah.
Right. And that's extremely helpful to do that. That's one of the things that I ask people when I work with them is, get 10 to 12 people and ask them to give you 3 adjectives of how they view you. And that can be, and while it seems like, oh, okay, I know that I'm, funny, lighthearted, or relaxed, whatever, but to see that on paper and to see how other people view you is really powerful. It's
And these
very
days it's
powerful.
so easy. You can do it on Facebook.
Absolutely. Yeah. You just simply
Do you
post,
think
hey,
people
this.
feel vulnerable asking that question? Do they feel like, what if someone says I'm stupid or ugly?
Sometimes I get people that are a little feel vulnerable with it. They're like, but again, that's also a very telling sign about developing your personal brand. Because if you have that much of a
Frustrated almost.
struggle
Mhm.
with asking people to tell you what how they would describe you, you're really, really going to struggle to build community and relationships. And that's part of the whole thing with having a personal brand. People want to get to know the person behind the thoughts and ideas, especially in this digital age when we're
Right?
so disconnected.
Mhm. Oh, I thought you were gonna say, because we can. It's easier. There's a lot more,
Well, there
there's
is,
people.
but I think it's also easier to sit behind a screen and, you know, post things, and you feel that there's a disconnect there, and people are looking for community, they're looking for connection, they're looking for ways to touch points
They
to
want you
connect
to
with
come
others.
through those communications. They don't want those. They can read all day long. They want to read
Yes,
and have an insight into who you are,
right,
right?
exactly.
The podcast will be back in less than a minute. Hey, writers. Are your creative juices running low? Are you skipping writing sessions because you're so busy or because you're just tired? Well, there's an easy fix.
Really?
Try Mighty Write. Mighty Write gets you writing and keeps you writing. Ingredients include creativity, writing, coaching, community, and Zoom sessions. Side effects may include productivity, finished work, bragging, and stupid grins. Try Mighty Write. Seriously, click on the link for more info about the Mighty Writers Club. Be mighty! The Mighty Writers Club. Find us at go.decodingcreativity.com/mighty.
Right, your
Mhm.
thoughts on a particular topic, what, okay, well, that person i- is saying exactly what I'm thinking,
Yes, that is exactly why we communicate.
and
Somebody
that's
out there
powerful.
wants to hear that. Yeah,
That's
needs to
exactly
hear
right.
that, needs to hear that, have permission to say that to someone else,
Right,
right?
that's
Or
exactly right.
needs to realize that they're not alone in that regard, right?
Mhm. Yes.
So especially when you get into vulnerable things, I'm amazed how infrequently vulnerable things are unique. We all have
Yeah.
the same vulnerabilities, right? I
Yes.
mean, we might say
Mhm.
them differently, and that helps different people attach to that and understand it. But
Right.
it's the same vulnerability. I'm not good enough. There's not enough for me. Nobody likes me. They're all the same vulnerabilities.
That's right.
So I guess if you went through like a top 10 tunes of the human fears, I just said three or four of them. How does your brand relate to that? That's an interesting concept. We're getting on a tangent, but that's an interesting concept,
It's very
isn't it?
interesting. And it's really, I mean, well, you're sort of getting into, Maslow's hierarchy of needs as well, because
Mhm.
you're connecting with people based on what they need and want at that particular point in their lives.
Right?
And so when because that drives us so much, it's a very, very powerful connection that you can create with people.
Yeah, yeah. So we have our personal brand. I mean, Jane Friedman, for instance, will say that if you're an author, your brand, your .com should be julierobertsauthor.com,
Correct.
or it should be so that it's bigger than the book you're writing. It's bigger
Hmm.
than, the moment in time, and it's extendable over time. So
Right.
obviously juliaroberts.com I can't have.
Yeah. Well,
But
that's why I went with Danielle M. Miller, because I couldn't get DanielleMiller.com, shockingly.
oh, well, mine's less shocking. I probably could with my middle initial.
I know, right?
I'm gonna try and get her to use her middle initial.
Yeah, there you go. See how that works.
Well, and I'm not Googleable, so I do use Decoding Creativity, Mighty Writers. Writers are the best readers. I do use other things because my name's not Googleable unless you
Right.
say comma creativity, or a comma creativity coach, or like I wonder how many TEDx's the other Julia Roberts has. I have one. It's got to be.
That's
You got to know
interesting.
it's
You
about,
should look that up.
and you got to know it's about creativity.
Right.
To get me.
Right, exactly. But that's what
Mhm.
you're known for. But again, but see, you have carved out this niche for yourself, because when you hear your name, you associate that with creativity.
Well, and that comes of, and this is interesting from a branding point of view, your mess is your message, or your hell is your hello.
Mhm.
Those two little, memes or tropes or whatever prove true. I'm a creativity expert because I couldn't get a book out of myself without learning what the heck was wrong with me. And it just took me 10 years, $30,000 to figure it
all.
out. To figure it
Not
out.
much.
And so that's why I became a creativity expert, because I didn't know one. If I'd known one who could have told me what was up, I probably would have, I would have rather written books those 10 years.
Right. But there you go. But now,
But now that's why
how
I'm
many people
associated
are
with
you
that.
helping? How
Yeah.
how much of an impact are you having because of
And
that?
start with me. I helped myself enormously, right? So
Right.
you can start with that as a branding. Your mess is your message. So even if you're not out of your mess yet,
Yep.
what is it that's you're struggling with that you feel like it's wrong, it's bad, you shouldn't have to struggle with it?
Right.
Right?
Yeah, you don't have to. That's another thing I think people get very twisted up about, the idea of personal. Well, I have to be perfect. I have to have it all figured out before I can talk about it or develop connections and relationships with people around this topic. And that is simply not true. That is
You just have
not
to be this much ahead of the other guy.
Yeah.
Right. But let's also say you just have to be transparent about what you are and aren't.
Yes,
only
exactly.
have to be perfect and
You
everything
do
if
have
you
to
have-
let people know that, hey, I don't know this about this topic, but I do know this for sure. I know this to be true. And
So if you're one of those
you have
people
to
whose
be-
brand is buttoned up, put together, perfectionist, you're going to have to be those things,
Yeah.
Whereas
Mhm.
if your brand is looser and more where you happen to be right now, you have that leeway. You have that
Yes.
awareness. Yeah.
Right. It's almost a permission that you give yourself to
Right.
not have to be this perfect persona.
Mhm.
That you can show up as truly who you are, and the right people are going to resonate with that. The right people are going to want to be connected to you, and they're going to want to listen to what you have to say because of that.
See, here's the beauty of not being Coca-Cola or not being McDonald's. We don't have to serve a billion people, right? I don't know how they say over a billion hamburgers.
Over a billion, sir. Yeah, I think, McDonald's has got to be that, sure.
Oh, sure. But we don't have to be that person. We don't have to be mass. We can be literally just the people we care about, which is the beauty. Like as soon as you have this brand and it's functioning for you, you find your people that you care about and you're not overrun by people you don't give a damn about,
That's right.
So I remember so my book Motherhood to Otherhood came out and I really identified as a mother. Obviously I had 3 kids and I was in the thick of it. So I really identified as a mother, but the people who were showing up were just every mother in the world. And what I needed was people who were ambitious and trying to figure out their next steps in life. I wasn't a parenting expert. I didn't really care about lots of kinds of mothering, which,
Right.
And it's hard not, I don't care about mothers, is a very hard position to take, but I didn't care about 80% of mothers. I cared about mothers who were very interested in figuring out their ambition, their otherhood from motherhood,
That's right.
because
That's
I
right.
did feel like you just kind of go, and then you come back this butterfly and it's a different entity from anything you were pre-motherhood. So all that being said, that branding was critical because I kept being overrun by people who really I didn't care about and they didn't care about me when they showed up,
Mhm. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I wasn't giving them what they were looking for. They were looking for validation for parenting decisions and all sorts of things that didn't have much to do with otherhood. For me was
And they weren't the right tribe for you. They weren't the right group
So
of people for you.
it is liberating to have your brand work well so that it filters people. We all have lives.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
We all want to help people or want to reach people or want to move people, and it doesn't matter to me once it gets outside my house if I move millions or not. But if those millions are trying to get back to me, this becomes a problem if they're not people I care about.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I tell clients and students that I work with is, don't be afraid to be pineapple on pizza, because not everybody likes that, and some people absolutely love it. And that's okay. Whatever that's a filter. That is a and that's the other great thing about a personal brand is because when you have a strong personal brand, people can self-select in or out. You don't have anything to do with it. You've already built your brand foundation and what you stand for and what's important to you and the message that you have to share. So people can come in and come out and you have nothing to do with it.
right? Well, you have everything to do with it, and yet you have nothing to do with it in terms of
Correct.
socially or awkwardness or all those
That's right.
things are handled out, on your sign,
That's right.
before they get in your house, so to speak, or in your
Right.
life.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
That's exactly right.
What about core values? Do you look at core values?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really big part of your personal brand because it drives everything that you say. Your
Mhm.
core values come from what the principles that you live by, the things that are important to you. And this is the other thing, you've got to narrow them down. You can't have 14 core values. You've got to have 3 to 5 that are your ride or die values that you would be willing to sacrifice almost anything to make sure that those values were showing up in your life.
And you still get to do those things you'll get time to do those things.
Right.
Your life permits you to value what you value, right? You're not getting so busy that you don't get to be perfectionist if that's your thing, or you don't get to have family time if that's your thing, or you don't get to have writing time if that's your thing. So those values feature in everything you project and how you engineer your life.
That's right.
Different from branding, but still how you engineer your life
It's
comes from
a big part
understanding.
of it, I think, because I have met so many creative entrepreneurs that will tell me that one of their core values is freedom, and they're spending 60, 70 hours a week on their business.
Mhm.
So then that's not one of your core values right now.
Seemingly.
Maybe
Well,
that's what you
seemingly
aspire to.
maybe the freedom is freedom from a 9 to 5 job,
It might
and they
be.
haven't noticed that they've built a new prison.
And
Is
that's
what
the thing. And that's the other thing that when I work with clients that we talk about is how do you define that value for yourself in your life?
Sure, because a different word like freedom could be different for different people in particular.
Absolutely. Abundance is probably different for me than it is for you. Wealth is different for, you have to take that value that you have determined is very important to you and define it on your terms. What does it mean to you in your life and your brand? And have it show up consistently. Even from that entrepreneurial perspective, those things drive the collaborations you might want to participate in or
Yeah,
not, the
or not,
opportunities that come your way or not.
right?
The people, the team that perhaps you want to have working in your business, if they're doing, some of your social media things or whatever, your email, whatever, those are all driven from core values. And so if you don't have those defined, you're going to have a lot of unhappiness going on with what you're doing because that's not showing up.
And yeah, and so that's engineering your life because your core values bring into your life people who are consistent with what you want and what you value. So like I've taken the values and action assessment online.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so, so my bottom 2 are self-regulation and consistency. I know that's shocking, but
What a bump.
but that made me really think because what 2 things does anybody ever say about losing weight? That you need to be consistent and that you need self-regulation,
Yeah,
right?
you need
And
discipline.
so, and if I don't value those things, even if I can get them up and get them going, I'm just going to 2 weeks later go, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Because I don't value it. So from my point of view, I have to find a different way to set up an effective weight loss thing. Go to my top 2, which is, funny or curious, or, go to something in your top several and see
Right.
if you could engineer a way to get something you want using what you actually value instead of what everybody around you says,
Right.
you should
Exactly.
use. Yeah.
Exactly. And that is so key, is being able to figure out what's the goal that you have and how do my core values fit into that, or how can I, like you said, engineer that goal so that I'm meeting my core values?
Because so what we're backing into here without really recognizing the course is that the branding exercise will bring so much of this into focus for you
Correct.
that you'll end up making choices that are cumulative instead of choices that keep being sort of misfires or their own prisons or bring you the wrong people or
or reactive or or rather yes. So it's a very, very much a structure that you are having the freedom then to do what you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So so you do regular people have brands. That's what that was the
Absolutely.
starting point of this, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And a message. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are, you have a message, and the ability to figure out what that message is and how you want to deliver it. It's really the essence of having a personal brand.
Yeah. And
That's what it comes down
every
to.
writer is going to have that, because if you don't have a message, you're probably not a writer,
No.
right? You're
Well,
off,
yeah, no, absolutely. And so you have to really consider, do I want to, say I'm not gonna have a personal brand, or are you going to say, this is a way that I can connect with more people. This is a way that I can connect with the right people. This is a way that I can impact people with the message I have to share, because I'm being strategic and intentional about how I show up and what I have to say.
And in doing that, you buy yourself space and you buy yourself power at the same time.
That is absolutely correct with a personal brand. Absolutely. Yeah,
I'm hearing
it's
it.
working for you all the time. It's working for you.
So even if I
you have
didn't
a-
intentionally set one, I have one. It's going, right?
Yes.
Right.
If you're putting work out into the world, this is the other way that I like to, have you sort of reframe this. If you're putting work out into the world, that's comes from you, your thoughts, your ideas, and you want that to be heard, you need a personal brand. You need to,
Because otherwise you're lost in the sauce. Is that what you're saying?
lost. Well, yeah, you're lost in the sauce. And how are people going to, again, why would they care what you have to say?
Right? Right. Mm-hmm.
Because you haven't taken a stand. You haven't said, this is what I believe in. This is what's important. This message is important to these particular people.
So
And
if you were thinking about it as like Times Square, there's a million people there. You don't care about anybody until one gets on a soapbox.
yeah.
And then everybody turns around and says, what's that guy going to say?
Think of
Right?
it this way. Well, think of it this way. How many times have you heard somebody say something? You've heard it over and over and over and over and over again. Maybe it's about weight loss, and some core
little
idea
thing.
about it, whatever. And you've heard it over and over and over and over again. But that one person says it to you, and you're like,
In a different way. Yeah.
whoa, mind blown.
Mm-hmm.
It's an aha moment that you have, because that person has defined how they want their brand voice to show up, and they have put their own spin on that message.
They have a voice, and that voice brought you in, and therefore you're listening to that voice, and therefore what they say has more impact.
Right. And it makes a difference to you.
And it makes a difference to you. Right. I feel like we've covered this in a really, I feel you've projected your brand beautifully.
Thank you.
we get the power of branding and why it's important from the things we've covered here.
I hope so. Again, again, some people will say, not really, not for me.
It's kind of baked into the creative personality to be suspicious of something called branding.
Yes.
Right? Because we don't want to be commodities. We don't want to be packaged or sold. We have sort of baked, not everybody, but there's creativity traits that are shared by lots of creative people. And there's probably 25 of them that have been identified. And maybe you personally queue up with 18 of them, but we all queue up with 18-ish of them. And therefore it's a pretty good list. And that list includes things like, we want a hall pass, permission to not have to do these things. We want, we don't want to be commodified. We don't want to believe that we can be packaged and sold. We're so unique, so interesting. And that's probably, even when that's true, there's a brand about it. Think of even just Mike Myers and Austin Powers or whatever. You think that's not branded, even though it's way out there in terms of the characters of the, how are you, baby? You want to shag,
Yes.
Yeah.
Shagalicious, baby.
But that's branded. And Mike Myers is branded. Right. He doesn't even have to have a typeface or a logo, but who he is branded. Tina Fey, branded.
Even you talk about James Patterson. Branded.
Mm-hmm.
Danielle Steele, branded. We were talking
Right.
about the other fictional authors. They have a brand. They
We know
have
what
a
to
way that
expect from
people
them.
perceive and think about who they are.
And we either really like their worldview and want more of it, or we've already checked out of them. So in that way, branding is also like a shortcut for bringing in people that care about you and keeping the others away
And
from
like
you.
I said, it's a self-selecting filter. You're either
Yeah.
in or you're out, and that's great.
Mhm.
So, that's, you don't
Pinky
want
rally.
people who aren't
Mhm.
really interested in what you have to say.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
want people that you're going to
Well-
impact. You want to know that you've made a difference to people. You want to know that you've caused people to think in a different way, or see themselves in a different way, or you've made a difference in some way to them. And that's
That
really
makes branding empowering. That's an empowered look at branding. Whereas
absolutely.
instead of that, look down your nose at branding, because you're done if you do that. You're already done.
Yep.
Whereas if you just open up the curiosity and allow yourself to be who you are,
Mhm.
and then package that the smallest amount so that it's easy to project,
Right.
then you
Mhm.
have power in the world. Yeah.
That's
And
right.
writing is not just writing. Writing is also readership. And it is automatically, it's a collaborative thing. We all want to be read. So this
Mhm.
is that bridge.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It is a
Mhm.
personal brand really is a bridge between what you put out into the world and the people who you want to have consume it.
All right. Mhm. And you
So
have a brand, whether you control it or not.
that's right.
Right.
So why not be
Anybody listening to
intentional,
this
strategic?
podcast already has ideas of who you are, already has ideas of who I am,
Mhm.
whether or not they know any of my little logos or any of my
Right.
little phrases,
Mhm.
they already have a bead on.
Yep,
Yeah. Mhm.
that's exactly
Anyway,
right.
it's very cool. I love it a lot because I really feel like I had a very hard time coming from corporate branding and 30 years of just, like push marketing instead of pull marketing, which is a completely different subject. And a brand being this monolith and being perfection and being, all these things that I didn't want to be. If anything, I wanted to escape American Express branding or
Right.
Avon. It was also one of my big ones. Pampers. I didn't want those. I didn't want to have to be that mainstream.
Right.
End of subject. So a
Yeah.
brand doesn't have to be mainstream. Doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to appeal to the masses. Most of us think of brands as being things that appeal to the masses.
Right.
But sometimes there's a brand that comes up. I think it's called. There's a water right now that I think is called Liquid Death.
Oh, wow.
And it's basically in a little metal, skinny little metal thing like a Red Bull can that you
Mhm.
can drink at a bar. And it's cool looking. And
Wow.
it's water, but it is growing like crazy because it's sort of disrespectful water.
It is. It's a new, yes, it's disrespectful.
It's growing
It's a
like
new
crazy.
take
And
on
mothers
water.
and fathers are like secretly going, my 13-year-old's drinking water because it's called Liquid Death. Thank you, brand. You can see what I'm saying. Like that
Right.
brand energizes an entirely different use and awareness and permission and
Yep.
communicates
Point of
something
view.
totally different. Yeah.
Mhm.
So a brand can just really shake up whatever you're doing. If you
Right.
just, it is, and you're not taking it on, you already are it. You're learning how to project it. Yeah.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's exactly right. And again, you decide the level of projection that you want to have out in the world. That's all within your power. That's all within your realm to decide all that.
Not everybody has to have a podcast.
No, they don't. Not everybody has to make videos or reels and dance on TikTok and all. No, you have to do that if you don't want to. Don't. Nobody's forcing you to. Don't do
Right.
that. That's not what it means to have a personal brand. So
Pineapple pizza doesn't do that.
no,
it's still
pineapple pizza
popular.
does what it wants because it's pineapple pizza.
All right. Well, that's Danielle M. Miller at daniellemmiller.com, and a personal branding expert who has been a friend of mine for a long time. And it's so nice to have you here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for
Thank
the
you.
opportunity and for inviting me to talk to your readership and your listeners. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. They're going to get a lot out of this. You brought us so much value.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you liked it, please subscribe and tell your friends. What did you learn today? What was your takeaway? What are you going to do today? Put it in the comments. We all want to know. Meanwhile, get my book, Write without the fight. You want to master your creative process so you can write with more ease and satisfaction. The links are all in the description box. Join us, because writers are the best weirdos.